Muchas gracias por su gentil atención y vamos a presentar en nuestra segunda sesión plenaria denominada Tendencias regulatorias mundiales como motor para el crecimiento económico regional, con los siguientes expositores: Russell Guthrie, director financiero y director ejecutivo de Relaciones Exteriores de IFAC; Lewis Ferguson, miembro del Consejo de Vigilancia de Contabilidad de Empresas que cotizan en bolsa; Felipe Pérez Cervantes, presidente del Grupo Latinoamericano de Emisores de Normas de Información Financiera; Marco Antonio Saldívar, presidente del Directorio de Bolsa de Valores de Lima, Perú. Va a moderar el señor Kenneth Chamberlain, quien es socio de PricewaterhouseCoopers y está radicado en Washington. Forma parte del Grupo de Políticas Públicas y Regulatorias de PricewaterhouseCoopers y es miembro del Consejo del Comité Global de Políticas Públicas. En esta capacidad trabaja con las firmas miembros de PricewaterhouseCoopers y con los grupos de interés de los gobiernos. Lidera la función de supervisión de política y de cumplimiento en su firma. Estimado Kenneth, tú tienes la palabra.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. And I'm very pleased to be here as a member of the regulatory working group of the GPPC. I was actually involved with the very first CRESAIR in Mexico City 10 years ago and have been part of the planning group and attended, I think, all but one or two of the CRESAIR events. But this is my first time at the front of the room, and I greatly appreciate the invitation. Just a brief, quicker introduction of my fellow panelists to talk about the topic of regulatory trends. We've heard already a bit about some of the big topics, the notion of trust in the world, and we're going to take that and turn that into a discussion a bit about regulation. First from a global level, and then how that has affected the capital markets here in the Latin American region. And to help me do that, I'm very happy to introduce the panel. Russell Guthrie is the Executive Director of Professional Relations and the Chief Financial Officer of IFAC. He's responsible for the external and member body relations, finance, and the overall governance of the organization. He also oversees the operating line for global representation and advocacy, and this includes public policy, regulation, and communications. He oversees the quality operating line, which includes the member body compliance program and the forum of firms. And prior to his career at IFAC, Russell was in the assurance practice at KPMG. We also have Lou Ferguson. Lou helped to set up the operations at the U.S. Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. He was its first general counsel, and he was appointed a member of the board in January 2011. He chaired the International Forum of Independent Audit Regulators, or IFIAR, which you'll hear a lot about during this panel. He chaired that group from 2013 to 2015, and he currently chairs the Global Audit Quality Working Group, which works very closely with representatives of the global audit firm networks. He previously had a successful career in private legal practice, including at Williams & Connolly and Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. Also pleased to introduce Felipe Perez. I think a lot of you here in Mexico certainly know Felipe. He is chairman of the board of directors of the Latin American Financial Reporting Standards Group, or GLENIF. He's also president of the board of directors and the Research and Development Center of the Mexican Council of Financial Information Standards, an independent institution charged with issuing accounting regulations in Mexico. Felipe also served as president of the National Executive Committee and the governing board of IMCP. He's a former partner of PwC Mexico, where he had a 40-year career. And finally, Marco Antonio Zaldivar. Marco is chair of the board of directors of the Lima Stock Exchange, which has over 250 listed entities. He's also an independent director at a number of companies, including Banco Santander, Peruvian Brewers Union, Backus & Johnston, and Cementos Pacasmayo. His areas of expertise include accounting, financial reporting, risk, and corporate governance, and he is a former audit and risk management partner at Ernst & Young. Just a brief word before handing this over to the panelists. In preparing for this session, I thought back to that conference 10 years ago and looked at some of the topics that we were discussing. And chief among them were efforts to converge and harmonize international standards and to adopt international standards in Latin America. I'm pleased to note that we set out with that initial conference to really drive and advocate the adoption of international standards in Latin America. And over the years, that discussion has shifted as international standards have largely been adopted in the region. And we're here today talking about topics of how to implement and how to improve quality. And I think that's real progress that's attributable to everyone that's been a part of this. We also talked about at the time the loss of investor trust in financial reporting and auditing, adoption and implementation of IFRS, and the need to increase the capacity in the accounting and auditing professions. It's also helpful to remember the environment at that time because it was a time of strong economic growth, particularly strong growth in emerging markets. We had as of September 2007, only the initial rumblings of the impending financial crisis that were to come a year or so later. I also remember at the time the topic of convergence to U.S. GAAP, between U.S. GAAP and IFRS, and particularly the U.S. adoption of IFRS, which at the time was considered by many to be something that would be when, not if it would happen. Just to kind of level set at that time, the SEC's concept release on the acceptance of IFRS by foreign private issuers was in its comment period. That was 10 years ago. And another thing happening at that time is there was an organization in its infancy for the audit regulators around the world, and that was IFIAR. Look forward to the environment today, and you heard a lot about that in the last two panels, the rise of social media and the impact that events can have through social media on the reputation of an individual or a company or firm. We've had further erosion of trust in institutions. Today, of course, we're post-financial crisis, but still very much dealing with the after effects of it, while we deal with new threats and new risks like cybersecurity and indeed the social media phenomenon and the reputational impact that I mentioned. But there's also at the same time a greater expectation by the public that companies and institutions will act in the public interest. And in many ways, they're looking less and less through regulatory mechanisms and directly to those institutions themselves to act in the public interest. There's a greater interest today in environmental, social, and governance matters, particularly the pressures on boards. So the trends that we see in regulation include regulations that bring about greater transparency, that strengthen accountability of participants, that enhance corporate governance frameworks. In this regard, I'd note the OECD's principles of corporate governance, and there's been really an explosion of corporate governance codes, new and improved over the past couple of years, and just generally higher expectations for independence. I'm also personally proud that the profession and our standard setters have moved really for the first time in my career, moving in the direction of an audit report that simply gives more information than sort of pass-fail on the financial statements, and I think that will ultimately make both the financial statements and the audit more usable to stakeholders. But we want to talk about how this affects the region's capital markets, starting from the global and working to the local. And so I'm going to hand it over to Russell to start with his remarks. Russell?
Thank you very much, Kenny. It's really a great pleasure to be with you here today and to be part of this very distinguished panel and discussing these very important topics. Today I plan to focus my introductory comments on one central theme: trust and confidence that is built on a foundation of an effective, consistent, and a certain regulatory environment. Build trust has become a mantra for IFAC in its engagement and its advocacy internationally, including with G20 leaders, the B20, and within the profession. In fact, the theme for IFAC's 2016 council meeting in Brasilia was Build Trust. Trust and confidence are essential ingredients for capital markets globally and, of course, throughout Latin America. Investors from outside of the region or across different Latin American or Caribbean countries need to have confidence in transparent and accountable regulatory environments if they're willing to take risks with their capital. In my introductory remarks, I will focus mainly on the following 4 topics: high-quality international standards, public sector financial management, integrated reporting, and the extended auditor's report. On the surface, perhaps these topics seem a bit dissimilar, but I believe all 4 have fundamental and interlinked roles to play in building the trust and confidence needed to fuel growth in Latin America and the Caribbean and underpin thriving capital markets and investment. So first, high-quality standards. High-quality international accepted standards are a central component of the global financial infrastructure and which underpin economic stability. Tremendous progress has been made in recent years in Latin America and the Caribbean towards the adoption of these standards in financial reporting, audit, ethics, and education. And I just want to lend my voice to the congratulations for the initiative of CRECER. I'm proud to say that I was there with Henri Fortin, who was mentioned earlier, but also with Debbie Spreitzer from the IADB when the concept of CRECER was born. And it's very gratifying 10 years later to see the progress that has been made in the adoption and the implementation of those standards. And so now, as we're making progress on adoption, the focus now must change to implementation and also to a program of continuous improvement. For the global economy and for all stakeholders, standards are the foundation of high-quality performance. As professional accountants and as regulators, you all understand that high-quality standards are critical to transparent financial information. It leads to enhanced comparability, credibility, consistency, and stability, and are critical in promoting investor and market confidence, which underpins growth. Now, the standard-setting model, which underpins international audit, ethics, and education and public sector standards, has evolved significantly over the past 2 decades. Today's model, in many ways, was very much before its time when it was formed some 15 years ago, and is firmly a private-public sector model, in which both sectors, private and public, have strong and clear representation. We believe that cooperation between the private and public sectors is a central feature of the model, recognizing that the public interest is best protected when all stakeholders cooperate and exercise their public interest obligations and perspectives. The current model enjoys strong safeguards to prevent interference and undue influence by any vested interests, including those from the profession and governments and regulators, and includes extensive, transparent, robust due process. And most importantly, this model has produced high-quality standards which are widely accepted across the globe. Over 100 jurisdictions have either directly adopted or used as the basis of their national standards the standards produced by the International Audit and Assurance Standards Board and the International Ethics Standards Board for Accountants. And in many jurisdictions, these standards have been incorporated into legislation or have been adopted directly as national standards. And I'm very pleased to report that in a study on international standard setting by the OECD late last year, the international standard setting model for audit and ethics was highlighted as ensuring the quality of standards with the participation of all stakeholders. In the next month or so, we are expecting that the monitoring group, which is a group of international regulators and other international institutions, including IOSCO, the International Grouping of Securities Regulators, the Basel Committee, IFIAR, the European Commission, the World Bank, the International Association of Insurance Supervisors, and the Financial Stability Board, all of whom comprise the monitoring group, will issue a public consultation on these standard-setting arrangements to publicly consult on possible enhancements to the model, which will include a review of governance arrangements, perceptions of independence, and the standard's speed to market. We as IFAC welcome this dialogue and remain committed to ensuring the quality of the standards that have been widely accepted around the world. Now, as individual securities regulators, national standard setters, even supreme audit institutions whose audit standards are based on ICES, all of your voices are absolutely critical to this dialogue. So I encourage you to watch this space and raise your voice and give us your opinions, because I need to remind you that at the international level, there is no lawmaker that can deem a way to go. This will only be changed or reformed by consensus. And I believe that you, as users of these standards, have a very, very important role to play over the coming months. So please stay connected with us as this process unfolds in the coming months. Secondly, I'd like to mention the importance of public sector financial management and accountability. Global public sector spending is simply massive. It is a significant component of global GDP. Government spending contributes from 1/4 to up to 60% of national GDP when you look at different nations across the globe. Yet, astonishingly, policy formation, spending decisions, management of assets and liabilities, and public accountability are frequently based on incomplete or low-quality information. And while most governments seem to share our view that private sector organizations should comply with the highest international standards, they frequently do not apply the same discipline to their own activities. And too often we see the consequences of poor public financial management, poor public services, sovereign debt crises, municipal bankruptcies. All of these contribute to a loss of faith by citizens that their governments can chart a sustainable financial future. And clearly, given the vast funds that flow through governments around the globe, there's an acute need for greater action on public sector financial management transformation. There has been a lot of progress in Latin America and the Caribbean on the adoption of international public sector accounting standards, but now, as I said before, the real challenge is to see that adoption through and to implement the standards to realize the great value they hold for strengthening accountability in governments across the region. Thirdly, I'd like to touch on the current and future information needs of capital markets and investors, which go well beyond financial reporting. Integrated reporting, or IR, we believe is a viable way forward. There's a growing awareness that traditional financial statements do not tell the whole story. The public and the investor community is increasingly interested in corporate stewardship of resources, and much of this thinking is coalescing around the International Integrated Reporting Council. The profession's role in promoting ways to advance integrated in thinking and reporting do matter, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it speaks to the public's interest in good governance and high-quality information. But as the IRC's focus expands beyond awareness building and towards implementation, a number of significant challenges are now in play. One thing is clear, given the early stages of development, integrated reporting needs more effective mechanisms for sharing information across industries and across the profession. To provide one such platform, IFAC has launched an IR network in which many of our professional organizations are participating. We've also recently revised our public policy paper on enhanced organizational reporting to explicitly advocate for IR as the way forward. Finally, I'd like to speak to the incredible opportunity the extended auditor report affords the auditing profession and other stakeholders. The changes to auditor reporting, which were issued by the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board a little more than a year ago, are now being considered, adopted, and implemented around the world. Some have said this is the biggest change for the auditing profession in more than 30 years. For the first time, there'll be an opportunity for auditors, without modifying their opinion, to provide additional information to the capital markets on risks that they have identified, their views of those risks, and how they have been addressed in the audit. However, this change also brings some challenges, such as discussing these additional disclosures with management and audit committees, and as well as how to concisely relay this information in auditor reports in a way that provides enough detail but does not confuse or create undue concern. However, while recognizing the challenges, I don't want to underestimate the huge opportunity to enhance the public understanding of what auditors do and the relevance of that important work. Extended audit reporting provides an opportunity for us to clarify our role as auditors, and through simple, effective communication, there is an opportunity for each auditor to gain trust, confidence, and respect of investors. In closing, I'd like to quickly touch on a couple of downside risks that we'd be very mindful of in striving for a regulatory environment that builds trust and confidence while driving economic growth. Although the opportunities I've just outlined provide great potential, there is a global trend of regulatory uncertainty and fragmentation. The IMF recently cited policy uncertainty and fragmentation as the main downside risk threatening the very nascent growth we're just beginning to see since 2008. We're also very aware that fragmentation between banking, insurance, and other regulators, in addition to cross-border fragmentation, are issues that are shared here in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I can tell you across the world, you're not alone in facing some of these challenges. We'll examine some of these specific areas in a breakout session later this afternoon, but we're just very conscious that this type of fragmented policymaking creates unnecessary uncertainty, complexity, and costs for companies and the capital markets. So we know how policymaking can go wrong and how this impacts growth and stability, and ultimately may leave the public no better off or possibly worse off. But what is the alternative? Well, at least as the profession, we can't just stand by and let this work itself out. We need to proactively speak out for policies that are forward-looking and likely to lead to stronger and more effective economies and capital markets. Also, I believe the profession can uniquely bring the importance of innovation and the capturing and harnessing of technology to many of these areas. So at IFAC, we've been working hard in this in our advocacy work with the G20, the B20, the OECD, and the United Nations, and other key policy institutions. And I'm very proud that this year the global profession was represented at the front lines of G20 policymaking through B20 task forces on financing growth and infrastructure and anti-corruption. It's up to us to strive for our messages to resonate with the public and with the policy decision makers, regulators, and governments and beyond. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell. Before I hand it to Lou, just a quick word for our friends in the audience. We will have a brief time for questions and answers at the end of the presentations, and so we can take advantage of translation. We're going to make microphones available, particularly for the questions that come in Spanish, if you'd use the microphone so that we can get the translator to help me with that. And Lou.
Thank you, Ken. I just want to tell you that I am delighted to be here. It's my first CRACER meeting, and I'm particularly pleased to be here on your 10th anniversary. It's a great achievement. It also happens to be the 10th anniversary of IFIAR this year, so we share a common birthday. I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of independent audit regulation, about why I believe it's important, and to express the hope that Latin American nations will sort of join the bandwagon. Currently, IFIAR has 53 members and only one member from Latin America. Brazil is the only Latin American member of the organization. So I just want to express the hope that independent audit regulation will take hold in South America, Central and South America, because I believe it's very important. There wasn't independent audit regulation anywhere in the world before the year 2002. In 2002, the United States suffered a series of major catastrophic financial crises, leading to the largest corporate bankruptcy in the U.S. up to that time. The Congress, United States Congress, said that the audit profession, which up to that time had been self-regulated, needed to be essentially reformed, and they created a body called the PCAOB, of which I'm now a board member, that is an independent body, independent of the profession. And independent audit regulation is defined today, and for purposes of membership in IFIAR, by two criteria. One, the regulator must be independent of the profession, which means that fewer than a majority of its board members can be affiliated with an accounting firm, can be a practicing accountant. And two, they have to conduct independent inspections of audits and issue audit reports. Those are the two criteria for membership, and those are the two criteria that are most important for audit regulation. Different audit regulators around the world may or may not be part of the government. The PCAOB is not. They may or may not have other functions. The PCAOB, for example, is a standard setter. The FRC in the United Kingdom sets disclosure standards as well as audit regulatory standards. So there are different things. Some regulators have enforcement standards. So criteria vary around the world, but the common criteria are that these bodies are independent of the audit profession and that they issue reports basically either to the firms themselves or in some cases to the public. The PCAOB issues public reports. A number of audit regulators issue public reports so the public can know what an independent group of people looking at the auditing profession believes about the quality of auditing in a particular country. Well, IFIAR started in 2006 with approximately 13 or 14 members. It's grown to 53 members over the past 10 years. And in April of this year, we created a permanent secretariat with a permanent administrative structure and an office in Tokyo. The organization is basically based in Tokyo today and has a staff of 6 people who do the administrative work of the organization. It operates through a series of working groups. And I am currently the chairman of a working group called the Global Audit Quality Working Group that meets twice a year with the leadership of the GPPC, the 6 largest audit networks. And we work on a number of different projects. One of the early projects we did was to create a global survey of audit quality in which audit regulators around the world would, and this was done under the auspices of the PCAOB, but it's basically an IFIAR project, but in which regulators around the world would submit their findings and they would be aggregated and put in a report. Today, we are on the 5th, issuing the 5th of those reports, and they include the audit findings of 33 different regulators around the world. They kind of express the state of audit quality around the world, and unfortunately they reflect an alarmingly substantial number of findings. And a finding is defined as the failure to have adequate audit evidence to support an audit opinion. And ranging between 30 and 45% of the files looked at have a problem. They tend to be in things that you might expect them to be, like internal control, hard to value financial statements or financial instruments, management estimates, difficult areas, but nonetheless they reflect a substantial area of lack of adequate quality. So one of the things that the GAQ, the group I lead, which is made up of 9 countries, the United States and Canada, in Europe, Britain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, and in the Pacific region, Japan, Singapore, and Australia, all very well-developed regulators at this point, are doing is that the 9 countries in that group have given the big 6 firms a target to reduce their findings as measured by those 9 regulators by 25% over the next 4 years. And we will be reporting this publicly to find out how they've done. Now, needless to say, this puts pressure both on us and on the firms. So part of what we try to do in the course of working with the firms, and we view this as a collaborative problem. This is not something they resist. This is something they're working with us. I mean, we have a very basically, I think the regulators today have a very collaborative, positive working relationship with the big firms. We view these things as a common problem. We view it as very important for the confidence of the investing public, frankly for the adequate functioning of the capital markets, that audit quality be as high as possible. So in order to try to achieve this, we will look at things, focus very specifically with the firms on, for example, the root cause of the problems. Why do these problems happen? Why do they happen recurrently? What is the problem with consistent execution? Are these cultural problems? Are they training problems? Are they technology problems? Are they staffing problems? There are a whole variety of things that get looked at, but nonetheless, it's an attempt to try to get a deeper understanding of the process of auditing, where it works, where it doesn't work. And this is actually beginning to yield results. And I'm quite confident, frankly, that in the 9 countries within the GAQ, that we will achieve substantial improvements. Now, the other thing that IFIAR does that I think is probably its most important function is that it's a teaching organization. Basically, we view ourselves as attempting to take countries that have less well-developed regulators and teach them what the more developed regulators do. And we do this through a variety of ways. We have meetings, but probably the most important thing is we have an annual training session where we bring in between 200 and 300 inspectors from around the world and have teachers, basically, from the more developed regulators who teach people how to conduct audit inspections, what to look for, how to look at things like financial instruments, how to audit a bank. And this is the way you, I think, frankly, begin to drive audit quality throughout the world. Some of our members lead regional groups. For example, Singapore and Malaysia are very active in the ASEAN group in helping other countries in that group, countries like Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam, to set up independent audit regulators and begin to teach people there. They hold regional conferences. South Africa does the same thing in Southern Africa. The World Bank has been active in helping this in conferences in the Northern Africa and in Eastern Europe. I would hope that this would be something we could encourage and begin to work on in Latin America as well, because I think I am a great believer that independent audit regulation leads to better results, leads to higher quality auditing, and ultimately, I think, leads to a lower cost of capital. One of the things that academic research in the United States has shown is that to the extent that investors have confidence in the financial reports and in the financial information they get, there is a directly relatable correlation to the cost of capital. It goes down. Just very briefly to run through a couple of other things we've done. We have created a multilateral memorandum of understanding in IFIAR that now allows 25 nations to share information, to share particularly in matters like enforcement matters and complex inspections where you can trade information back and forth in a way that couldn't be done before. We've also conducted coordinated inspections where 3 or 4 regulators will inspect a single multinational company, and where they do it simultaneously and then exchange information so 4 regulators know what they think about this company. And that gives you a whole new perspective that no single regulator has. One of the reasons this kind of cooperation is so important is that the big enterprises that drive much of the economic activity in this world today span the globe. They're not confined to any country. Many of the largest companies in the United States, by market capitalization, have significantly less than 50% of their operations and revenue generation in the United States. So it is very important, and no U.S. auditor is able really to deeply go into the countries where some of their operations are in a way that would be as good as they can be if you either have a strong global network and if you have regulation that works together. So for all those reasons, and I'm going to stop here, but for all those reasons, I am a great believer in the coordinated effort among regulators and the importance of independent regulation. And I certainly hope and would be more than happy to participate in attempting to help Latin America develop a robust independent regulatory scheme.
Thank you, Lou. You've just earned yourself an invitation to the next Crecer. And Felipe.
Yes. Thank you very much. Welcome to Mexico. Y esas son las únicas palabras que diré en inglés. Me da mucho gusto estar participando en el evento Crecer. Por ahí hay algunas ayudas visuales, si son tan amables, en este 10º aniversario, promoviendo la confianza para el crecimiento económico y tendencias regulatorias como motor para el crecimiento económico regional. Y si vamos a hablar de tendencias regulatorias, tenemos que hablar de disposiciones normativas. Al hacerlo, obviamente, debemos discutir el rol que en todo esto ha jugado el International Accounting Standards Board, el IASB, que tiene por objeto desarrollar un cuerpo de normas de información financiera, a single set of high-quality standards, understandable, enforceable, and globally accepted financial reporting standards based on clearly articulated principles. Y lo digo en inglés porque en México tomamos la decisión a nivel de la Comisión Nacional Bancaria de Valores de no usar ninguna versión que no fuera la de la versión en inglés para la aplicación de las normas internacionales de información financiera en las empresas que cotizan en el mercado de capitales. El objetivo del IASB es que estas normas deben incluir en los estados financieros información de alta calidad, transparente y comparable, y otra información financiera para ayudar a los inversionistas y otros participantes en los varios mercados de capitales del mundo y a otros usuarios de la información financiera a tomar decisiones económicas. Un gran logro del IASB, y ustedes lo saben, es que en muy pocos años, en alrededor de 150 países, de una manera u otra, se aplican o las full IFRS o las IFRS para pymes. Esto pueden comprobarlo en el Pocket Guide que todos los años publica el IASB. El objetivo del IASB no desarrolla normas para entidades del sector gubernamental ni entidades sin ánimos de lucro. En lo que se refiere a información financiera, a las normas que emite el IASB, hemos creado a nivel regional el GLANIF, el Group of Latin American Accounting Standard Setters, el GLAS, que tiene por objeto interactuar con el IASB en los aspectos técnicos, opinando sobre papeles para discusión, borradores de normas de revisión de las normas existentes y presentación de propuestas de cambios y o mejoras que contemplen las situaciones específicas de la región. En sentido coloquial, queremos ser una voz uniforme de América Latina ante el IASB para promover la adopción y la convergencia con las normas emitidas por el IASB en las jurisdicciones de la región. Otros objetivos son cooperar con los gobiernos, reguladores y otras organizaciones regionales, nacionales e internacionales para contribuir con la mejoría de la calidad en los estados financieros de la región, así como ofrecer propuestas a la agenda del IASB y promover el alineamiento con la agenda de la región, interactuar con otros organismos de Latinoamérica en temas relacionados con las normas contables. Nuestro grupo está integrado por 17 países de habla hispana y portuguesa. Ahí tienen ustedes la lista y la conformación y solo estamos en espera de un país más para que tengamos una cobertura total en Latinoamérica. El enfoque de nuestro trabajo se logra a través de la creación de grupos técnicos de trabajo. Cada vez que sale un documento del IASB, lo sometemos a discusión profunda, nombrando un miembro de nuestro directorio, que está integrado por 8 personas de 8 diferentes países, quien nombra un coordinador y se integra con representantes de prácticamente todos los países de Latinoamérica. En el periodo, como decía, se han integrado 58 grupos técnicos de trabajo. Se dice fácil, pero ustedes conocen los documentos que emite el IASB, algunos cortos, pero algunos de muchas páginas. Esto nos lleva a que, si lo único que se debe de tomar en cuenta son las normas internacionales de información financiera o las normas locales en algunos casos o las normas para pymes. Y resulta que en los tiempos recientes, y hablando de tendencias, hay otras opiniones que surgen de reflexiones profundas de que los usuarios de la información financiera requieren de información adicional a la que expresan los estados financieros preparados de acuerdo con normas. En palabras del chairman del IASB, Hans Håkersborst, considera que la relevancia de las normas de información financiera no está siendo amenazada. Sin embargo, la información financiera, si bien ofrece la evidencia más tangible del desempeño de una entidad y el estado de resultados se mantiene como la fuente más objetiva y comparable de la información financiera para inversionistas, estos siguen siendo el instrumento principal para inversionistas y entidades financieras para valorar el desempeño de la empresa. Sin embargo, hay voces que dicen que se requiere de otra información, por ejemplo, de reflejar intangibles en los estados financieros, de reflejar en esos intangibles estrategias de la empresa, modelos de negocios, know-how técnico, el entorno externo, cómo afecta, la competencia, el desarrollo económico, los desarrollos estratégicos que hacen las empresas, sistemas de distribución, talento, innovación, gobierno corporativo para la toma de decisiones. Y por eso es que en 2010 el IASB publicó el Management Commentary Practice Statement, que es un documento de práctica, marco amplio, no vinculante para presentar comentarios de la Administración relacionados con los estados financieros preparados de acuerdo con normas internacionales. No es una norma internacional, no es una IFRS, no es obligatorio. Su contenido es flexible y puede variar de una entidad a otra. Esos comentarios a la gerencia son un informe narrativo que tiene un complemento a los estados financieros preparados de acuerdo con normas internacionales, que explica objetivos y estrategias de la gerencia, que ayuda a evaluar las perspectivas de la entidad, que comenta los riesgos generales, que da elementos importantes de comunicación con los mercados de capitales y que no se establecen frecuencia para su publicación. Cada entidad podrá decidirlo. Estos usuarios de la información preparada en esos contextos del Management Commentary son inversionistas, prestamistas, otros acreedores, analistas. Y esta información debería de ayudar a los usuarios a evaluar mejor el rendimiento de la entidad. Los propósitos de los comentarios para la gerencia es dar puntos de vista de la gerencia, que pueden ser en algún momento subjetivos, circunstancias positivas y negativas que están atravesando, explicar lo que ha sucedido y por qué ha sucedido en la empresa, implicaciones para el futuro de la entidad, comentar tendencias y otros factores, considera no solo el presente, sino también el pasado y el futuro, y podrá incluir proyecciones y pronósticos. La información a incluir incluye la naturaleza del negocio, objetivos, estrategias, recursos, riesgos estratégicos, relaciones con grupos de interés, resultados, indicadores de desempeño y las perspectivas de la entidad. Según leí recientemente, si bien no es un compromiso formal, sí el IASB está considerando en algún momento el actualizar este documento de práctica sobre comentarios de la gerencia como una forma de llegar a que sea exitoso la iniciativa que voy a comentar a continuación. Ya se referían antes al International Integrated Reporting Council, el cual tiene publicado un framework, un marco conceptual, que busca proporcionar mayor información y elementos para conocer la creación de valor. Y en esto hacen mucho énfasis. Hay que dar énfasis a la creación de valor en las empresas. Es información que no se proporciona actualmente en los estados financieros, preparados de acuerdo con normas internacionales. Los principios para el reporte integrado son incluir un enfoque estratégico y orientación hacia el futuro, estrategias para la creación de valor en el corto, mediano y largo plazo, conectividad de la información, relaciones con las partes económicamente interesadas, materialidad, ser conciso, confiabilidad en la información y que sea completa, y consistencia y comparabilidad. Hablan de que el contenido del reporte integrado debe tener 8 elementos: panorama organizacional y entorno externo, gobierno corporativo, modelos de negocio, riesgos y oportunidades, estrategia de asignación de recursos, desempeño, perspectivas, bases para la presentación del reporte integrado. Es muy ambicioso. La realidad es que si, por ejemplo, analizáramos cada uno de estos, requeriríamos de un tiempo muy extenso para poder llegar a conclusiones, pero nada más para que tengamos una percepción de la magnitud. Se debe incluir en qué hace la organización y bajo qué circunstancias opera, en el panorama organizacional, la misión y la visión, cultura ética y valores, propietarios y estructura organizacional, principales actividades y mercados, escenario competitivo, nuevos competidores y si hay rivalidad o simplemente es una competencia abierta, productos o servicios sustitutos, poder de clientes y proveedores, posición de la cadena de valor, el enfoque externo, el ambiente, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. No me extiendo porque no tenemos tiempo. Esto es de una enorme magnitud, es muy ambicioso y de alguna manera es subjetivo, aunque se busque hacerlo lo más objetivamente posible. ¿Cuál ha sido en Latinoamérica la atención a esto? En mi opinión, y con base en una encuesta rápida que hicimos entre los países que integran el GLENIF, ha sido limitada. Nos hemos concretado a difundir la existencia de estos requerimientos, tanto del Management Commentary publicado por el IASB como del importe integrado. Y en el futuro cercano, el IRC opina que es de esperarse que el concepto de Integrated Reporting será la norma a seguir, habrá que ver. Desde luego, esto no le quita validez ni importancia a las normas internacionales de información financiera. El GLENIF está convencido de la validez que tienen y de la aplicación generalizada que se ha logrado en muy pocos años. ¿Cuáles son los posibles obstáculos? Bueno, es información muy extensa, lo del Integrated Reporting, implica subjetividad, tiene problemas de la competencia, como no es obligatorio, podría haber empresas que lo publiquen, pero entonces la competencia va a estar muy contenta de no publicarlo, pues, en función a la información privilegiada que van a conseguir. Y al no ser obligatorio, no hay un enforcement, no hay una sanción para quienes no lo publiquen. Uno de los problemas que podrían surgir, pero que se puede resolver, es que al haber 2 instituciones promoviendo que haya información adicional, son de escucharse, y que se puede lograr a través de un memorándum de entendimiento que se firmó entre el IRC y el IFRS Foundation, la cual plantea las bases para una cooperación entre ambas instituciones, lo cual sería deseable. Es el futuro, pero el futuro ya está aquí y debemos de enfrentarlo con entusiasmo, con dedicación y con profesionalismo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Felipe. Marco?
Gracias, Kenny. Muchas gracias a los organizadores por la invitación. Yo quería revisar el impacto de las regulaciones desde lo que hemos trabajado en el proyecto de mercado integrado latinoamericano, que dentro de la Alianza del Pacífico que ustedes conocen integra México, Colombia, Perú y Chile, para crear un mercado común. Dentro de ese mercado común también está el mercado de capitales. Y este trabajo y los puntos que voy a mostrar ahora han resultado de aquellos trabajos entre los ministerios de finanzas, los reguladores de estos países, las bolsas de valores y los inversionistas más importantes, tanto locales como internacionales. Empezando en qué nos hemos centrado. Hoy día en mercado de capitales, y lo dijo muy bien el secretario de Hacienda en la mañana, los mercados desarrollados han empezado a recuperarse de manera importante, y en la última parte que ustedes pueden ver, los mercados emergentes, los mercados donde están Latinoamérica, han ido cayendo. Sin embargo, en los países que forman el mercado integrado latinoamericano se tiene fundamentos sólidos para seguir creciendo, y hay un interés importante de inversionistas institucionales de seguir fomentando y poniendo su dinero en estos países. Y una parte importante que ha sucedido es que el mundo ya es claro que, si vemos los últimos años, una constante ha sido la volatilidad. Y ahí vemos los hechos que llevan a la volatilidad en los aspectos importantes que han pasado en el mundo, desde el desaceleramiento del crecimiento chino hasta lo último que ha pasado con Norcorea. Sin embargo, esta volatilidad no ha afectado de manera importante los valores que están en el mercado integrado latinoamericano. Es algo que hace probablemente 10 o 15 años se consideraba utópico. Esto es que si uno lee de repente un poco ligero, va a encontrar que esta región es menos volátil que los países desarrollados. Pero lo que sí nos da es que hay una confianza de inversionistas. Los 4 países que forman el mercado integrado latinoamericano mantienen su calificación como grado de inversión, y si ustedes ven, en los últimos años ha seguido la tendencia de crecimiento. Sin embargo, esto también tiene un aspecto que podemos medirlo como si el vaso estuviera medio lleno o medio vacío. Los mercados de capitales en nuestra región todavía son muy pobres en relación a su contribución dentro del PBI comparado con los países desarrollados. Y lo que la teoría económica dice que es el desarrollo de un país se da cuando se tienen mercados desarrollados. Y en este mundo el volumen manda, el tamaño sí importa, y por eso es que la creación de este mercado integrado latinoamericano, donde se pueda negociar como una sola plataforma en esos 4 países, le dará una mayor visibilidad y una potencia a la economía de nuestros países. De ahí es que se resultó cómo la regulación puede apoyar a que este mercado regional y también los mercados locales, no podemos evitar de hablar de los mercados locales, puedan crecer. En todo este desarrollo se encontró obviamente que hay un mercado mucho más complejo. Hay una región donde tenemos, igual que en cualquier actividad que hemos visto, es una región con altas desigualdades. Tenemos compañías muy importantes que han crecido en mercados internacionales a través del mercado público, listando en bolsas importantes, en Londres, en Nueva York. Por ejemplo, también empresas privadas que han crecido de manera importante y se han expandido al mundo, algo que no existía hace 15 años, y se ha acuñado un nuevo término llamado multilatinas, aquellas empresas con origen latinoamericano que han salido al mundo. Esto crea el primer tema de cómo las regulaciones empiezan a mirar. ¿Por qué? Porque los mercados domésticos y en todos los 4 países hemos sentido que se ha perdido liquidez y se ha perdido participantes. El mundo es mucho más abierto, y más abierto estos países tienen una economía abierta, y por lo tanto los inversionistas tanto como las compañías han huido un poco a mercados más desarrollados. y una de las tareas pendientes es recuperar esa liquidez y recuperar esa profundidad en nuestros mercados. Sí hemos visto también una importante presión de mercado para cumplir con estándares internacionales. Y en nuestro mercado nos encontramos que los mayores participantes en estos 4 mercados son fondos de pensiones y fondos mutuos. No es el inversionista de a pie, el inversionista individual. Con lo cual, la contraparte que tienen las empresas es una contraparte mucho más fuerte para negociar. En muchos casos no necesita tanto la protección de un regulador o una protección de las leyes de una bolsa, porque ellos tienen la capacidad y el tamaño para ejercer su propia defensa. En algunos países, pocos fondos en número pueden representar hasta el 30 o 40% de la propiedad de una compañía. Y esto les crea un tema de poder. Entonces, el tema de qué debemos regular, hacia dónde debemos regular y qué debemos proteger es un tema que está en la agenda, movido básicamente a que los reguladores buscan un mayor compromiso, evidentemente, para incrementar la transparencia y traer las mejores prácticas internacionales. Los inversionistas institucionales que recibimos en las bolsas de valores, que conversan con los reguladores, piden que en el mundo ya no haya empresas o ciudadanos de segunda categoría. Todos deben tener la misma categoría y tener unos estándares y mejores prácticas. Y ahí vienen también los temas que se ha hablado hace un rato. Los inversionistas empiezan en la región a preguntar y a buscar un cumplimiento de las normas ambientales, sociales y de gobierno corporativo, lo que se llama el ESG en inglés o ASG, y que tiene que ver con la forma de reportar en lo que tocó Felipe, el reporte integrado. Entonces, nos hemos encontrado en los últimos tiempos que tenemos unas regulaciones que están bajo fuego. Los reguladores se han sentado, han revisado que necesitan enfocarse específicamente en cuáles son las necesidades que tiene la región para los esfuerzos de traer capital y las demandas en el futuro próximo, y no necesariamente tener políticas copiadas enteramente de otras regiones que pudieron haber sido muy útiles en su momento en determinados países, pero que tendrían que ser adaptados y probados a nuestra realidad. Un ejemplo que sí es clásico, ya no está ni en los inversionistas, ni mucho menos en la primera agenda de los reguladores, es el cumplimiento con las normas contables. Las ideas, la información financiera preparada bajo IFRS en todos estos países ha llevado que la confianza en los inversionistas en tanto la información financiera esté preparada sea probablemente el aspecto que más se ha avanzado en esta regulación, y por lo tanto, si bien existen posibilidades de mejora, no está en la lista de las top priorities que tienen los reguladores en el mejoramiento de la capacidad de atracción de capital. Lo que sí los reguladores han empezado a mirar y a comparar es que estos estándares relacionados con los temas ambientales, sociales y de gobierno corporativo necesitan ser desarrollados. Hay buenos casos, pero que no se conocen, y si los casos no se conocen es como si no existiera. Y aquí el tema está disperso, hay compañías y hay países que han avanzado más y hay países que todavía estamos empezando. Dentro también las bolsas de valores, la bolsa peruana se ha incorporado al grupo de bolsas sustentables para tratar de llevar estas prácticas y políticas a la práctica en nuestro país. Y un aspecto que nos ha golpeado en los últimos 2 años de manera importante a la región, y los inversionistas y analistas para recomendar la inversión en la región nos ponen como punto básico es dónde están las políticas y prácticas anticorrupción que deben llevarse a cabo en el mercado. Será el ISO 37001, serán las políticas parecidas al Foreign Corrupt Practice Act de Estados Unidos o las normas británicas, pero algo sí es claro que tenemos que hacer y está en la agenda. Otro aspecto que sí es importante destacar es que mucho de lo que hemos encontrado es que no todo es un problema de existencia o no de la regulación. A veces en Latinoamérica y en algunos países más que otros, no es un tema de norma, sino un tema de cumplimiento de la norma. Y hacer cumplir la norma y las regulaciones es una tarea que tanto los ministerios como los reguladores y las bolsas nos hemos fijado como prioridad. No es el hecho de ir creando normas, sino es el hecho de que las normas que existan sean cumplidas. Ese es un cambio importante en cómo internacionalmente nos ven en la región. Otro de los temas importantes es el tema de gobierno corporativo. Ya el tema de gobierno corporativo en la región, en los códigos, tiene más de 20 años, pero usualmente ha seguido una política de cumple y explica. Con lo cual el inversionista lo que tenían eran códigos de alguna parte obligatoria, pero la mayor parte era voluntaria. Y la decisión de invertir o no invertir de las compañías o los inversionistas dependía del cumplimiento. Nos hemos dado cuenta que los inversionistas ponderan mucho mejor si existe una parte del código que sea obligatorio. Mientras la mayor parte del código sea obligatorio, van a sentirse una mayor seguridad en la inversión. Y otro de los temas pendientes, y es un tema importante en nuestra región desde muchos años, dado el tamaño de las compañías y la consolidación de la propiedad en pocas manos, los temas relacionados con conflictos de interés, el trabajar el conflicto de interés y las políticas de conflicto de interés a nivel de leyes, a nivel de regulaciones y a nivel de políticas corporativas son muy importantes, porque la gente siente que existe la posibilidad muy clara, y te lo dicen, que el inversionista controlador, el inversionista principal, que además no solo es dueño de esta compañía, sino también dueño de a veces de instituciones financieras, dueños de conglomerados, puede fácilmente tomar acciones que puedan dejar desprotegidos a los inversionistas minoritarios. Y este es un tema que, dada la importancia que tiene este tipo de compañías en nuestros mercados, es un tema que se está revisando. No es un tema fácil, porque es un tema que implica a veces cambios de conducta, no solo cambios normativos, sino de cambios de cómo se hacen los negocios. Eso es básicamente lo que quería mostrarles, y dejo a Kenny para el desarrollo de las preguntas. Muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you, Marcos. We have lots of good questions up here, and I actually came armed with a few others myself, but we are very short on time and want to get you back on schedule as possible. So there's actually one question that came in. It's directed at Lou, but I think actually any and all of the panelists may have a view on this, and I'd like to first put this to Lou, and then happy to hear reactions from the others as well. Some of the countries in the region have argued that, or have expressly said that they need to develop their professional accountancy organizations and the professionals themselves, stronger accountants and auditors, and place the priority there, and only then will they then look at implementing independent audit oversight bodies. Interested in reactions as to, is that kind of the right way of attacking the issue, or should countries be looking at those choices in a different way? Lou?
My reaction would be you do both, and that this is something you can do simultaneously. This is not unique in the world. There are a lot of countries, for example, in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, that have exactly the same problem, where the profession is not well developed. And I think this requires cooperation with the big auditing networks, which are very active in developing the profession, with the professional associations, with the universities and places that train auditors. I mean, all of this needs to be done simultaneously, but I don't see that there's any reason to wait to create independent audit regulation until you develop the profession. Because, I mean, for one thing, how do you know when you've developed it enough? I mean, is somebody going to come along and give you a mark and say, okay, now you're an A, and therefore you should have an independent audit regulator? I mean, I think you do it all you do it simultaneously, and you work together and you reach outside the region if necessary and ask for help. The big auditing firms themselves are very active in attempting to develop the profession in different countries, and you ought to work with them. The government agencies or professional bodies ought to work with the firms. They know how to do it. They've got great expertise, and ask other regulators. Come to IFIAR, ask IFIAR for help. Ask the World Bank to do that. I mean, this is not a unique problem, though, to Latin America.
Thank you, Lou. Russell, I knew you'd want a shot at this one.
Yeah, and essentially I would agree with what Lou had said. It would probably apply just a couple of additional filters, which would be to also really look at the size and the aspiration of the capital market and the audit market more generally. We've heard similar expressions from some African countries where the policy choice was actually to build the oversight first, and literally there was not a profession, organized profession at all, and the capital market was non-existent. And so I would challenge that prioritization. But if each country is a little bit different, so look at the audit market, capital market, and aspirations there, and then sequence accordingly.
I actually would agree with that if there's no capital market, but I think most of the countries in Latin America today have capital markets. You've got functioning stock markets. Some of them are of reasonable size. So I don't think you're not in the stage where there are no capital markets here.
Okay, Marco or Felipe, any further thoughts on that question?
Bueno, de lo que hemos visto con los reguladores peruanos, yo diría que el tema del regulador independiente en auditoría está en la bandeja de deseos y no en el carrito de compra, ¿no? Creo que es un tema de tiempo.
Thank you. Others? Nope. Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Sí, yo con mucho gusto. Yo creo que el regulador en México ha jugado un papel muy importante en muchas áreas. Y pudiera ser que en algunos temas no estemos totalmente de acuerdo, pero la labor que han hecho ha sido fundamental, particularmente en el sector financiero, en donde los requerimientos que han establecido prevén la posibilidad de que caigamos en una crisis similar a la que se cayó en 1994 con lo que se mencionó como el efecto tequila, y que, bueno, ahora las restricciones y disposiciones son bastante más estrictas, lo cual garantizan que haya estabilidad y no sorpresas negativas en el corto plazo. Un aspecto que está por resolverse es que hay un criterio prudencial en la aplicación de los aspectos regulatorios en México, lo cual no es criticable, es muy entendible, pero que ha hecho que a nivel de los bancos y de las instituciones de seguros en México no se apliquen las normas internacionales de información financiera per se. La tendencia es que haya muy pocas diferencias, creemos que cada vez serán menos, pero la norma en sí es las normas mexicanas, muy similares a las internacionales, más ciertos criterios prudenciales del regulador en México.
Okay, thank you very much, Felipe. I understand there is one question on the floor in Spanish with a microphone, and I think we'll probably close with this one, but go ahead. Oops.
Muchas gracias. De todos es sabido que las calificadoras de riesgo de los Estados Unidos en esta década de 2007 a 2017 empaquetaron activos tóxicos mezclados con activos buenos y los calificaron como AAA, causando una crisis financiera mundial. A pesar de ello, para el sistema regulatorio norteamericano, ello no ha tenido mayor significación y estas calificadoras de riesgo continúan operando normalmente. A pesar de este antecedente, estas entidades continúan calificando, por ejemplo, el riesgo país de los países de América Latina. La pregunta es, ¿qué grado de credibilidad se debe asignar al trabajo de estas empresas. Segundo, ¿qué opinan las organizaciones de auditoría sobre este aspecto? Tercero, ¿cuál es el riesgo moral del trabajo de estas calificadoras? Y finalmente, ¿cómo impacta esto en los mercados de capitales en América Latina? Gracias.
Okay, someone want to take that one?
A ver, el tema de las calificadoras de riesgo es un tema que se ha escrito bastante. Fueron sancionadas en Estados Unidos básicamente con temas monetarios. Y siguen teniendo importancia en el sistema básicamente porque no hay algo mejor. Y el problema, sí evidentemente han tenido un aspecto de que pueden perder algo de credibilidad, pero lo que no han perdido efectivamente es fuerza en el mercado. El mercado sigue tomando en consideración fuertemente las calificaciones de riesgo y no hay o no se ha desarrollado aún un sistema que pueda dar una respuesta a esa calificadora de riesgo. Mientras no haya, los mercados toman ese valor con todas las limitaciones que puede tener como lo mejor que hay.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm not quite sure I understood the question, but to the extent I did, I think a couple of things happened in the United States following the financial crisis, which basically led to the collapse of, or certainly infusions of very large amounts of money by the United States Treasury into each of the major financial institutions. But the criteria and the amount of capital that each of those banks has to hold now as sort of risk capital has been increased dramatically. So the core capital of the banks has been, and I think that has changed the risk profile of the banks. There has been, to some extent, a change among bank regulators in the United States of the kinds of assets that banks can hold. And I think they would, the regulators would look very much askance at holding the kinds of collateralized debt obligations and mortgage-backed securities that led to the financial crisis of 2008. Now, as to the audit profession, I mean, there was a lot of criticism of the audit profession. How was it that the audit profession was giving clean opinions, clean financial opinions to the largest financial institutions in the United States within a few months before those institutions had to be bailed out by the U.S. Treasury, and they essentially were, for all intents and purposes, insolvent for market purposes. Many regulators looked at that with great intensity. The Securities and Exchange Commission did, the Attorney General of the state of New York looked at it, the PCAOB looked at it, and we concluded that, I think everybody concluded basically, every regulator in the United States that looked at this, was that these were not audit failures, that what happened here was a complete and unexpected collapse of liquidity in the U.S. financial markets that then became a global collapse because many of these assets were held by banks around the world. I mean, how do you look at that as a Latin American? What does it do to Latin America? I don't know. I mean, banks are today. There's a very active discussion in the United States about how risky are the big financial institutions? What are the risk premiums? And they have not performed as well in the financial markets in recent years, I think partly because there's a concern about the risk profile of these banks.
Okay, thanks, Lou. We have lots of good questions here, and I have a few for Felipe about tequila effect, but we're unfortunately out of time, so please join me in thanking the panel.
Agradecemos a los expositores de la sesión plenaria número 2 y nuevamente invitamos a un miembro del comité organizador para que le entregue su respectivo reconocimiento y presente por su participación. Para Russell, para Lewis, Felipe, Marco Antonio y para nuestro moderador, Kenneth. al momento de agradecerle nuevamente a los expositores de la segunda plenaria, tenemos algunos anuncios importantes para todos. Por favor,